It's mind-boggling with the Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission, RMAFC, releases a statement that 7 trillion naira had been shared across all tiers of government in the last 6 months. With an unprecedented increase in the government treasury, one is bewildered with the recent widespread hunger protests in the land. The big question is, how are the funds spent? At a briefing in Oshoma, the Osun State capital, the National Secretary of the All Progressive Congress asked citizens to challenge their state governors on infrastructural development, bearing in mind the recent revenue floats.
Any governor that is not performing, let them ask what has happened to the huge amount of resources that has become available to them after the removal of the fuel and the subsidy.
Let's take a look at the breakdown to make a sense of it all. This fiscal outlook captures how the monies released are being shared by the 3 tiers of government, including the 13% derivation for the oil-producing states.
Things are beginning to turn around and go in the right direction that we want this country to go. It's going to take time. It's going to take time, but I'm very hopeful. I'm very believing that if we sustain the process, if the central bank continues their path of focusing on monetary policy, not getting into projects that don't concern them, if the ministries are doing what they are supposed to be doing, being active and proactive, just trying to make a difference.
We speak to the chairman RMAFC on the disbursement of the funds and why there isn't much impact felt across the tiers of government.
I think it's not correct to say that Nigerians are not seeing the impact of this, because me and you are here in Abuja. In a lot of states, various activities are taking place. I know, for instance, I can give example of Borno State. I've been there last month. I have seen a lot of developments that were embarked by the previous government and the current government.
With the widespread hunger in the land, there seems to be a disconnect between what is perceived as a windfall, 7 trillion naira within 6 months. We should be able to see this clear impact across all tiers of government.
The states and the federal government are facing lots of challenges. There is a high cost of inflation, which we all know, and that there is a global downtown, a global kind of recession. We had COVID the last 3-4 years, and that you look at it globally, inflation is everywhere. But the federal government has initiated some policies whereby they are trying to streamline revenue generation and spending and cutting down on cost of governance.
You are in charge of revenue mobilization.
Yes.
What would be your advocacy for the state governments in terms of how to properly utilize these funds?
The best way to do this is for them to increase their internally generated revenue. The population that we have in Nigeria should be an asset to us, not a liability. What they can do is to create an environment where more businesses will thrive, generate more revenue, and be able to engage in social services to the downtrodden, the poor.
While it's pretty difficult to have a holistic metrics of state government performance regarding this, the RMFC boss says Nigerians shouldn't expect a magic moment so soon, because most of the state governments had only just passed their budget not long ago. Here at the headquarters of the Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission, a statement comes out saying a mind-boggling 7 trillion naira has been released within 6 months to all tiers of government. But what we've seen is widespread hunger protests across the land in the last couple of weeks. But the chairman of the Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission, Mohammed Shehu, says we shouldn't expect that magic windfall impact across the state because budget has just been passed. But in the couple of days, we expect that the state government would sit up and find a way to bridge the gap and uplift the state beyond poverty line. From the headquarters of the RMEFC, Benga Ashuru, reporting for Arise News, Abuja.
Right.
Well, many thanks, Agbenga. Well, for many Nigerians, it is suffering in the midst of plenty.
Right, let's bring in Liborous Oshoma, who's joining us from our Lagos studio to take a look at this. Liborous, good to see you. So we're looking at 2023 revenue mobilization figures now, saying 7 trillion was given to, well, the federal government and shared to the states July, December. Before that, 5 trillion between January and July. Adding all of that together, about 12 trillion naira. Now, the fundamental question is, how has this reflected in the lives of the ordinary Nigerian?
Yeah, Ngozi, thank you, and thank you to my brother Suleiman. Let me drive this point home with the statistics and the figures. Because of time, I won't be able to give you the figures state by state, even though I have all of them here. But I will sum them up and give you region by region. The Northwest with 7 states, before subsidy removal, was collecting 37.749 billion, but currently collect about 53 billion naira monthly. The Northeast with 6 states used to collect 26.8 billion, but now collect 38.8 billion. The North Central with 6 states before subsidy removal was collecting 25.9 billion, but currently collect 37.5 billion. Southwest with 6 states had 36.1 billion, but currently collect 48.3 billion. Southeast with about 5 states was with lowest revenue collection was 21.1 billion, but now collect 33.9 billion. South with 6 states is the highest. They used to collect 112.9 before revenue subsidy removal, but now collect 126.3. So, Ngozi, against all of this, the consistent question is, why are people not looking at the governors? Because the system of government we practice, makes everybody fixated at the center, that the center gets so much, and then the governors have been reduced to salary-paying agency. And that's why people have been calling for restructuring. Let the citizens understand that the revenue actually comes from the bottom to the top. So all of this revenue you go to Abuja to share, if you like, give all the revenue to the state governors, you're still going to have this crisis, because the orientation we have is that the federal government collects all. The federal government, has so much revenue. Meanwhile, in actual sense now, with what is happening, the state governors also collectively, the state governor in collaboration with the local government collectively collect about 41% of the total revenue.
No, 46.
46% of the total revenue. You have 4% for ecological. You have 4% for ecological. So, and then you have the local government, the state collects about 25, the local government collect 21, that's 46. So, because of the structure of governance that we operate, the consistent shedding of weight by the federal government, concessioning, the seaport, you're concessioning some of your responsibility to private individuals, people still believe that the federal government collects more, and so the fixation should be at the federal level. That's why we have this so much hunger, and when there's hunger, the state will point accusing fingers at the state, at the federal government, rather than look inward. We're not talking about internally generated revenue here. These are revenues from FARC. Nobody's talking about the internally generated one here. I don't have those figures here. So what this means for me, Ngozi, is the fact that there's need for people to also look inward, look at the governors and ask questions. What are the House of Assembly? How are the Houses of Assembly checkmating the powers of the governors, whom majority of them have turned to emperors?
All right,
the same way the National Assembly would be able to checkmate the powers of the president.
Well, Liborous, let me weigh in here, because I think you've just been able to unpack it all for us. So what we're seeing now at the moment is just the tip of the iceberg. We're not talking about the internally generated revenue. In other words, there's no poor state in Nigeria. And sometimes you wonder when people start to talk about missing funds in some of these states, so it makes you shudder. Speak to us on how we can make these executives of states, governors as it were, truly use these monies from FAC and even internally generated to impact lives of the people.
Let me quickly, before I go further, let me give you an instance with, take a state like Imo State. Imo State before now was collecting 4.5 billion, but now collects 6.6 billion. And then you have another state like Oyo. Oyo used to be 6.4, but now collects 8.4 billion. Then you have Plateau. Plateau used to collect 3.7 billion, now collect 5.6 billion. These are states we don't even talk about when we discuss. Benue was 5.2, now 7.4. Then you had Bayelsa, 16.8, now 19.6. Akwa Ibom, 24.7, now 26.2. Yeah. Edo used to be 7.3, now 8.8. How do we make these people responsible?
Right.
When you have a State House of Assembly that is almost like an appendage of the governor, you're going to have the governors turned to emperor. Take a look at Edo. In the last dispensation, for a whole 4 years, you had a House of Assembly where 14 members were completely locked out of the House of Assembly. And so you had a few who feel, being members of the House of Assembly, being inaugurated was a privilege. As we speak now, Plateau states, you still have some members of the State House of Assembly in Plateau that are not inaugurated. Nobody is discussing it. Right. As we speak, also in Abia State, there is a member of the House of Assembly that have won his case at the Court of Appeal, yet is not inaugurated. You have 11 members of the PDP in Abia State and 9 members of Labour. Yet Labour is the head of the majority in Abia. So what do you have when you have a House of Assembly?
What you're saying is that, look,
that
simply,
is docile.
the state governors are emperors, to such an extent that some can steal as much as 80 billion naira, well, allegedly, as in the case of the embattled former Kogi State governor. How do you plug these loopholes now, and how do you ensure that the states actually do deliver? I mean, speaking of revenue allocation, it should reflect the level of responsibility of each tier. But you have a situation where the federal government, just like you stated earlier, gets about 52.68%. How do you ensure that where it matters the most, that the most money goes there?
Section 87 and 88 of the Constitution vest monetary powers on the State House of Assembly. You cannot spend money without appropriation. But when you have a State House of Assembly, that's what I was trying to explain to you. When you have a State House of Assembly that is like an appendage of the governor, then there is no way you are going to have a transparent accountability at the state level. And until we restructure the federation, we need to look at the people that go into the State House of Assembly. What's the quality of the people we elect to the State House of Assembly? Are those people that we get to the State House of Assembly and then they see the governor as a lord, as an emperor? Do you know that in some states in this country, every Sunday, the House of Assembly, the Speaker takes the motion to be moved for the week before the governor, for governor's approval. And that's supposed to be an independent House of Assembly. So in some states, we see where House of Assembly members are giving resignation letter by a governor before inauguration. So the day you decide to question the executive, you are shown the way out. So when you have that kind of arrangement, you are consistently going to have a situation where governors collect so much money, become emperor, and they are not accountable to anybody.
All right,
even at the national level,
apologies, Liborous, we're almost out of time. So much for the troubles, for the problems. Give us a solution or solutions. Way forward. How can we put a stop to this?
That's what I'm saying. You see, we are so concerned with the presidential election alone. What should concern us mainly is elections to the local government and the state house of assembly. These are government that is closest to us. I decided to reel out this figure so that people will understand the amount of money that accrues to our state. We're not talking about internally generated revenue. So when you have people who know next to nothing to superintend this kind of resources, then you just fixated on the presidency alone. After the presidential election, we all go to sleep. We forget, about state house of assembly. And mind you, for every constitutional amendment, there must be concurrence of the state house of assembly. So the state house of assembly you need to have a very powerful state house of assembly for you that are able to checkmate the powers of a governor. For you to have a governor, even though not benevolent or not wanting to be benevolent, but he will be compelled legally to so do by the state house of assembly. That's the solution. Or we decide to restructure, go the way of fiscal federalism, like a lot of people have been clamoring, so that people can take charge of the finances of their states.
Absolutely, especially at the local government level. That's where it matters the most. Presently, they get 20.6%.
Yeah.
Liborous Oshoma, we have to say thank you very much for joining us on News Night.